You're listening to Healing Voices Project, where we share stories and the latest information from people who fight addiction every day. I'm Mike Torville, your host and author of Voices from the Fallen. Thank you for listening, for following, and most of all, for sharing with people you care about. Make your voice count too. Hello everybody, thanks for joining us again here at Healing Voices Project. I'm Mike Torville, your host of our program, and we appreciate all you people out there listening. We have a guest today. His name is Harvey McNulty. Harvey has become a friend over the last year or so, and thanks for coming in, Harvey.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Well, it's been a while. We tried a few times.
Yep. That's for sure.
And it's just we've had some mixed double luck with acoustics and timing and all this kind of stuff. So thanks for coming in once again.
Absolutely, anytime.
Harvey, you are a treatment advocate at the Swift River Addiction campuses in Cummington, Massachusetts. So we're going to talk about your job. We're going to talk a little about your personal history, what got you into what you do now. You have a lot to talk about. You've been involved with treatment advocacy now for how long?
I've been involved in treatment advocacy really for the last, 3.5 years.
Okay.
I'm coming up, God willing, on 5 years sober.
That's great,
And that sort of thing. And so for me, really, I didn't really get involved in advocacy until I was probably, honestly, really about, 18 months sober, and started working a really solid program. And really getting connected with the community out here in Western Mass. I'm originally from Boston, born and raised and that sort of thing. So
you don't talk like you're from Boston.
No, some people would, I think, maybe disagree, but
does it come out when you're angry?
Yeah, it really comes out, maybe in the car or in traffic or something like that,
okay. Which you don't have out here compared to Boston. Anyway,
Yeah. No, there's nothing like, Mass Ave traffic.
If you came from Boston, were you an inner city guy?
Yeah. So I lived in the south end of Boston. I'm a native of Dorchester, and
now it's coming out.
Yeah, so I start naming certain, areas within the 617, and it comes out a little bit for sure.
Yeah. It all just brings you right back.
Yeah, it does. Well, if I talk to someone from back home, I'll forget it.
Well, we're going to bring it back a little bit too.
All right.
And we're going to talk a little bit about your childhood. We're not going to get that deep, but just so to have some context of your history and what brought you to where you are today. Now, you said you're coming up on 5 years. Mm-hmm. When will it be 5 years?
So December 16th of this year will be 5 years. I got sober.
Congratulations, that's great.
Thank you. As really
gave yourself a Christmas gift back then, didn't you?
Yeah, I didn't know it. I didn't actually even realize that. When I got sober, I didn't want to be sober. In all truth and honesty, like for me, I on December 16th of 2019, I had a run-in with the law. Back then, I was homeless in the streets, living in the streets. I had, really, ruined my life and burned it to the ground pretty good.
And yet, you still didn't want to be sober.
No.
Yeah.
No. I sat in jail for a few months, with no bail, 12 open court cases between 2 different states, and I'm sitting in jail at 36 years old. No one wants to talk to me. My family wants nothing to do with me. I'm unemployable. I'm not teachable at this point. I have my life's just chaos and mess. And I went through a lot of emotional turmoil, mentally, physically, and spiritually. And for me, at that point in time, when I look back, I never really gave recovery a fair shot. You know, I would go to these 12-step programs and treatment facilities for, 19 years of my life. And
you would go because you were required to, or because you wanted to?
no, well, prior to getting sober this time around, I would go because I actually wanted to. Like, the first time I ever stepped foot in a 12-step fellowship, I was 17 years old. I was young. My father was in recovery at the time, and he 12-stepped me.
So let's go back, and because we will go
Sure.
as we go a little bit back to the beginning and somewhat chronologically, because we're like watching a movie when we see the end of it, and then you got to go back to understand it. Right?
Yeah.
So let's talk about when you were younger. You said you were 17 when you first. So you had some years or some time before that. That led to that, obviously, and your dad. Well, okay, let's go back to where things really started.
So for me, I'm the oldest of 9.
9. Wow.
We have 5 brothers, 4 sisters, and it was a wild time. I remember, growing up as a kid. I grew up with a single mother. My dad did a lot of time in prison growing up as a kid. So, I grew up with not a whole lot of structure in the home. I could kind of just do what I wanted when I wanted. My mother was a tough cookie for the most part, when she had to be, when it came to school or dealing with, anything that had to do with, involvement of showing up in some areas, but not all. So I really got to raise myself growing up.
Being the oldest, did you have to take part in bringing up some of your younger brothers and sisters?
Yes. Oh, absolutely, 100%. I had to learn how to be an adult at a very young age. I'd say around 14, 15 years old is when I really started having to help take care of my little brothers and sisters and stuff like that. So I felt a lot of pressure to learn how to adjust to, some unconventional norms, if you will, at a young age, and helping my siblings get ready for school, help them get their lunches prepared to go to school, making sure they get home, watching them when they would get home.
You were like the dad.
Yeah, exactly. Facilitating somewhat of a trying to facilitate somewhat of a fatherly role, if you will, and and so that weighed on me a lot. The fear, doubt, and insecurity and all that stuff would come out. And growing up, I remember, I living in Dorchester and going to all Boston schools. Back then, if you were, I feel like it just didn't fit in right away, because the thing for me, being biracial growing up in the early 90s and late 80s, was not a very popular culture to grow up in, or just human being to be.
Did you feel like you didn't fit in one or the other?
Yeah. So I'd go to South Boston, for example, and I'd get picked on, for being dark. They'd be like, oh, there's the black kid, from Dorchester. If I go on to Dorchester, I'd be called, oh, here comes the white kid, So either way I went, like it didn't, I didn't really jive too well with those within the community in that regard, in terms of, connecting. And then the only people that did really want to hang out when I was young were the Spanish kids, and I didn't speak a lick of Spanish, but we resembled each other.
Yeah.
So there was like that sort of, off-like connection, but not really. So I knew just growing up as a kid, I was like, all right, well, I don't really fit in Southie. I really don't fit in Dorchester. The Spanish kids want to hang out with me, but I can't understand them. So I guess I'm just going to, do my own thing. And what happened for me is, at an early age, I got into a lot of trouble. I ended up, this kid would pick on me in school, and he'd always take my peanut butter and jelly. And one day I had enough. I went home, I cried, told my mother, I'm like, listen, this kid won't stop taking my peanut butter and jelly. And so she smacked me upside the head, said, act like a man. And so I did what I thought a man does from what I learned in the streets, and I went and grabbed the butter knife, put it in my pants, got on the school bus, and I threatened the kid with the peanut butter knife. And that was my first interaction, at 8 years old. with the Boston Police and the superintendent of Boston Schools.
Oh boy, you're only 8.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Right.
And so I had issues with myself and other people and just life in general, really, at a very young age. And I took what I could and did the best that I could, and what I learned from the street. And so growing up in that environment, my mother would always, when I was around that age, she would always be out at bars at night, so I'd be stuck with my siblings and watching them and whatnot. So there wasn't like a whole lot of guidance.
No structure at all.
No structure at all. So
left to you. Yeah.
Yeah. But my mother did the best she could. She was a single mother trying to raise kids. At that time and growing up, I really didn't come to understand, the reality in the situation, the nature of both my parents or my life situation until about 5 years ago.
Wow, really?
Yeah.
Now, you went through this. When did you start? You said you got in trouble with the law. You started drinking.
Yeah. So I had my first drink and drug at the age of 15. I'll never forget. I was at my buddy Dan O'Brien's house, and to sort of just backtrack just a little bit to segue into the rest of it, really, which is like, so after that incident, really, at the school, my mom brought home this guy, and he turned out to be a great guy. He, by God's grace, I always thank God for this guy, Bob, who was my stepfather. He came into our lives, and he instructed my mom, like, hey, we need to get Harvey out of here. Let's bring him to North Attleboro, 45 minutes south of Boston, and he can get out of, hopefully he won't, at least he won't end up in the street or end up in, a gang mentality. Mm-hmm. So that's what they did. And so growing up, I get involved in sports. I start getting involved in school more. I start doing really well in school in the sports.
Amazing what that influence has.
Yeah.
Yes. Okay. Yeah.
I mean, and that was, because what I had learned, I started, taking cues from, of course, the environment around me in North Attleboro, and here it is, more emotional turmoil would come up, but it was remarkable when I look back on it, here it is, I'm going into this new environment that looks like TV land to me. All these kids around me have, they're either middle class or upper class, folks who have, mom and dad at home, the mom's bringing, the daughter to ballet, the father's bringing, the sons to football practice or participating in their sporting events, and parents are showing up to PTO meetings. And I'm going to school, and I'm like, I don't even know what a PTO meeting is. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I'm just like, all right, cool. I get some time off from school, Mm-hmm. And my mom's still doing what she's doing, and we're living in North Attleboro, low-income housing. So, again, here it is. I'm in this new environment, and I feel different from my peers, and I feel like I can't really connect. And as a result of that, I start making a few friends here and there. And when I meet, one of those people that I got to meet was Dan O'Brien. He passed away a few years ago, God rest his soul. But, I would always go over to his house because his house was the cool house to hang out at. You could party over there, you could drink, you could drug, you do whatever you want as long as you didn't leave the house. And so for us kids at 15, 16 years old, like that was like the place to be. And that's where I had my first hit of marijuana, my first drink of beer. And I didn't like beer. To me, I was like, I couldn't understand why people like the taste of Budweiser. I was like, this is gross, and so I remember thinking to myself, I'm like, all right, like I still don't understand why people drink this, and then I watched my buddies take like 2 or 3 beers, and I watched the effect that alcohol produced on them. And I saw that warm, elusive, carefree feeling, and I said, I want to feel like that all the time. Mm. I'm like, wouldn't that be nice? Right, and so I begrudgingly drink the beer, and I get the effect. And I said, I want to feel like this all the time. And so that became, I managed to play sports, go to school, and do that on the weekends. And I couldn't wait to do it again. I was never one of those folks who would, puke or go to the bathroom on myself or anything like that. I would just, I felt a little oozy, and that'd be it. And, and from there, what would happen is, I'd go on to play football and baseball and basketball for a little while up until the rightful age of 17 years old, and then me and my sister had a big blowout. We got into an altercation over a Boys to Men CD. I was supposed to go on this important date with this girl in high school, and me and my sister Janice, she's the oldest of the 5 girls, and it would be like a civil war in our house, and so we get into an altercation over the CD. I threaten her over the CD, and she calls the police. The police come, and I go on the run because she tells them, she stabbed me in the back with a pitchfork when I was a kid. And then I turn around and I go and I grab my BB gun upstairs and I put it to her head and I threaten her, and she calls the police, tell them I have a real gun. And I go on the run to Maine, and I had heard my father got out of prison, so I go up to Maine, and then I go up there and I take the last $20 I have, I get on this bus, and I go up to Waterville, Maine, actually, excuse me, and I go and find my father, and I'm like, hey, I want to live with you. And he goes, well, you can't live with me. I live in a pre-release. And at this time, I don't know anything about jail. I don't know anything about pre-release. So I'm trying to convince my father to come let me live with him at a pre-release. And he's like, that's not how it works. So he gives me some money. I go back to North Attleboro. My mother gets on the phone with him, days later, and says, you got to come get this kid. And so at this time, I can't live at my mother's house because she's got a restraining order on me. So I go to my buddy Dan O'Brien's house, and I live there. And I go back to drinking and drugging some more. And like a week later, my father, unbeknownst to me, shows up at my buddy's house, and we're sitting in the camp and we're drinking, we're smoking weed, and my buddy Dan O'Brien's mother calls him up to the front of the house and says, come here, I need you to take care of something. So I'm thinking he's just got to take care of a chore. He comes back down to the camper, whips open the door to the camper, and says, Harvey, there's a big black guy here looking for you who looks like you. And I'm like, what are you talking about? I'm like, I think you need to stop smoking weed. I think you're a little paranoid, And so I go out front, and there's my father, and he says, you got 2 options. You can either come with me to Portland, Maine, or I can knock you out right here. And I was like, I'll go with you to Portland, Maine, because I was terrified, of course. He was a New England Golden Glove boxer, and he was a 15-time felon. He had a very notorious reputation, I should say, about him. And so in the couple of times I'd seen him as a kid, he was a pretty vicious fighter, pretty good. And so I go up to the front of the house and I keep my distance from him because I'm terrified, and I'm like, all right. So I get my belongings. I go to Maine, and it says, you got 3 options. When you get up, you got 3 rules when we get up here. You're going to go to school, you're going to get good grades, you're going to stay out of trouble. Mm-hmm. And that's it. Now, I'm 17 years old. I don't want to go to Maine. I'm from the city again. In my version of when I think of Maine, the first thing I think of is deers, hunting, fishing, and rednecks. And so for me, I'm terrified. And and so I go up there and I'm like, this is going to be boring. And I go up there and I play sports and I do well for 90 days. I do all right for 3 months. So then he rewards me, gives me $300, and I go and buy an ounce of weed with it. And when he finds out that he ends up finding out that I bought an ounce of weed with the $300 he gave me, and he slammed me up against the wall and he said, you got 2 more options. I can knock you out right here, or you can come to an AA meeting with me. So I went to the AA meeting, and that was my first introduction at 17 years old to a 12-step fellowship, and it's, from that moment on, I didn't, my first AA meeting, I'll say, self-disclosure, I didn't like it. I didn't care for it. I didn't think I had a problem. I'm 17 years old. Right? I'm just a kid who's having some trouble growing up.
Harmless stuff, right?
Yeah.
Yep. Yep.
And so, fast forward, the last 19 years, right? That's, in a nutshell, really, kind of what my life would mimic is I would go to meetings. I knew, in the beginning I was like, this isn't for me. I'm going to go out and try some more controlled drinking. I'm going to try some more controlled partying. I'll just party on the weekends. And, and so what happened is I stopped going to the meetings early on. My dad kicked me out of the house, and we moved in with this girl, managed to graduate high school. So then I went on from there to try, I'm like, well, maybe if I go to college, this will fix me. Maybe if I go to the Marine Corps, this will fix me. I did, I went to the Marine Corps for 3 months, got kicked out, I went to, I tried going to community college, failed, dropped out, ended up in the streets of Boston, in Maine, in Florida, and all over the country really for the better half of 19 years. And what happened is around, I want to say 2011, 2012, I'm living in the veterans homeless shelter in Boston. I go to this meeting because I'm sick and tired of being sick and tired. And I go to this meeting, I meet this girl, and I convince her to let me move in her house within, a few hours. And so I go and I move into this girl's...
Pretty convincing,
yeah. Yeah, when you're lying, cheating, and still manipulative and spiritually sick, you get pretty good at it.
Yeah.
And so what happened is I end up going, moving into this girl's house. She's she comes from an extremely affluent background, and what happened is God gave me what I wanted. I ended up with this beautiful girl, access to a lot of money, and privilege that had nothing really to do with me. That's her life, and I stole a piece of it, for sure. And and what happened was I ended up going to college. Ended up going to Bunker Hill Community College, getting my associate's degree. I made everything look good on the outside. I got an associate's degree, a little get well job. Ended up going to UMass Boston. Her parents and her are flying me, out to Cuba, London. I'm going to Florida. I'm going and doing all these things. Right, so everything looks good on the outside. I got brand new clothes. I got all this stuff. But on the inside, I feel like I want to die. Right, and I can't figure out why I feel the way that I feel. Because finally, God has answered my prayers. I can't sit there and use the excuse, I don't have a nice place to live. I don't have people that want to help me or support me. And I don't have opportunity. I can't sit there and say that anymore. And at this point, I'm thinking to myself, all right, I'm 27, 28 years old. I'm going to get my stuff together here. And so I do that for, I manage, quote unquote, for as long as I can for, 3 or 4 years. I'm with this girl. And she says to me, and so now I'm taking $5,000 of her money every day, and I'm smoking crack. And
wait, took how much? How often?
About $5,000 a day.
A day?
Yeah.
Well, that'll get you somewhere.
Yeah, get you nowhere quick.
Wow.
Because it didn't progress. Like over the 19 years, I had tried, all various different substances. My disease progressed, and it got to a point where she had tons of money, and I took advantage of her, and I took opportunity on that, and and it was just horrible, absolutely horrible, and so I ended up having this vicious crack habit. I'm doing everything underneath the sun, smoking crack and drinking and doing whatever I can do, and and finally, I tell her, because at the time she's actively drinking, and I'm like, you need to go back to 12-step fellowship, and she does, because I think, at the time I'm sitting there, oh, well, she's drinking a couple bottles of wine, she's getting out of hand, right, and I'm thinking, your drinking's pretty bad. At least when I smoke crack, I'm just sitting in a room, isolating by myself. I'm not bothering anybody. I'm just paranoid and stealing your money.
You got to put her into place.
Yeah. So I thought, yeah. And so what ends up happening as a result of it, she kicks me out.
Yeah.
And I end up in the south end of Boston, homeless, living in a dog park. And my solution is at that point in time is, you know what? I'm gonna smoke methamphetamine, and I start smoking that, and then I turn around and I rob a guy for his house and in his drugs, and I turn it into a real trap house. And and what ends up happening, and I terrorize, half the city, lying, cheating, stealing, fighting, doing whatever I got to do, and it was just terrible. It was just a horrible existence, and I wasn't, I was just one of those guys who was just walking around lifeless. Mm-hmm. And and today, I've been able to walk through a lot of that stuff and walk through most of it and do, the things that ask for help and really get on that.
So you got worn out by all that. You got worn out by all that, right?
Oh, I got worn out.
So at some point, and we'll jump ahead a little bit, so going back. But you ended up in jail.
Yeah. So what happened with that was, so what ended up happening for me was I had robbed this guy for his house, trap house, and then I left. I was like, I'm out of here. I want to go to Boston. I want to go to New Hampshire. I'm smoking tons of methamphetamine at this point in my life, and I get on the Boston Express, and I'm thinking I'm talking to this girl. I get on the phone on Facebook, and I think I'm gonna go meet this girl at a hotel up in New Hampshire. And I get off the bus, and I'm met by 4 national detectives. And there's, I don't know how I got catfished, what I did. I get, and I get arrested at this bus terminal.
Probably made a few enemies.
Yeah. Oh yeah, for sure. So, and I get arrested, and I get caught with, methamphetamine on me and all this stuff, and what happened was I smoked so much methamphetamine I cooked myself from the inside out. So I was bleeding. I bled out 1.5 pints of blood, through my genital region, and so I can't walk. And I'm sitting in jail, and I got a diaper on, and I'm 36 years old, and I'm waiting to go up to, Valley Street, to be booked or whatever in Manchester, New Hampshire, and I get booked, and I remember, my lawyer saying to me, he's like, look, you're not getting any bail. You got 12 open court cases, drug possession charges, assault. You got all these charges looming, and you're not going anywhere. So you're gonna sit here for a while. And I sat there for a while, and then finally, when my trial came, the judge, by God's grace, said, look, you can either go to treatment, or you're gonna go do all that time.
So you had to be thinking, okay, here I am in jail with a diaper on. I had all things in front of me that were good for a while. Now you've lost it all.
Yeah.
You blew it completely.
Yep.
Now you're in jail, and you start to say, okay, you've got to go to treatment. When you get out of jail, you continued with treatment?
Yeah, so when I get out of jail, I was released, not on my own personal recognizance, but I was released to BHN Phoenix House, which is now BHN's Springfield Center, which used to be known as Phoenix House.
That's what brought you to Western Mass.
And that's what brought me to Springfield.
Okay.
Springfield, Mass. I was dropped off there by this angel program. They brought me there, and that's where I got introduced really to, I had some idea, like, because of all my previous experience that my father, introduced me to with the 12-step fellowship. I had some idea of what kind of help was available to me. And this time I took it serious, because I said to myself, you know what, I'm 36 years old. What am I doing? Right? Lying, cheating, stealing, manipulating, hurting people around me, pretending to be something I'm not. Like, that's not who I am. And at that point in time, I didn't know who I was. And so I feel like, I had that God moment where truth collided, with honesty for the first time in my life. And what that looked like is when I run my life and I make the decisions based off of the way that I think and all these things on my own, I ruin things, and so I needed help. And so I get to this halfway house, and I start going to a 12-step fellowship. I reach out and I start working a 12-step program, and I get a sponsor, and I start doing some things, and I start learning about who I am, and how my disease has affected me, on all 3 sides of my life, mentally, physically, and spiritually, and what happens is I finally, I start doing the work, and I start getting honest about, my selfishness, my dishonesty, my self-seeking and fearful emotional nature, and my behavior and how I respond to those things, and it hasn't, in the beginning it was extremely tough, but what I found out here in Western Mass in the recovery community is unlike anything I've ever found across the country, honestly. I found better access to treatment out here, and they have less resources. But the community here is strong, and they care. You know, and part of that for me was, you know, I spent 3 or 4 months at the Springfield Center, and then I went, and thank God to this day, you know, and then I got the opportunity. I went to a different sober house for like a couple weeks. That didn't really work out. I stayed sober the whole time, and then I picked up the phone and I called a friend, and I said, listen, man, I heard great things about, you know, the Michael J. Diaz Foundation. Like, I want to get into one of those houses. How do I do that? And he helped me get in there, and you know, and thank God for you know, the executive director at the time, you know, and he gave me the opportunity and shot. And if it wasn't for those guys who were serious about their recovery.
At the Michael J. Diaz.
Yeah, at the Michael J. Diaz Foundation. Man. And if it wasn't for the Michael J. Diaz Foundation and that staff, I can tell you right now I wouldn't be sitting here today. You know, that place changed my life. It's done so much for me. Like, I can't, honestly, sometimes it's hard to even put it into words.
It made the entire difference.
Yeah.
And you were there for a while.
Yep.
And you said it was earlier when we were talking, you said 18 months after you were sober, mid-December of 2019.
Sure.
December 16th, right? 18 months goes by, and you're going through these programs, and you ended up into doing this kind of work. What got you into this type of work?
Honestly, it was funny. I've always wanted to help folks. I just didn't know what that was going to look like, and you know, and the truth of it is, for me, is that it was interesting. I was just looking for, you know, a get well job. A friend of mine called me and he said, you know, there's a job opening as a recovery coach with, you know, the Holyoke Police and Community Center in BHN in Holyoke, and I'm like, wow, that would be cool. You know, I love helping people. You know, that's always been a dream of mine, is to be able to give back, you know, and to be able to help people in a meaningful and impactful way. And so he says, yeah, go ahead, go on and apply. I think you would be a good fit for it. You know, you have some experience in, you know, with your recovery and your background to be able to help folks, you know, come into treatment. And I said, yeah, no, absolutely, I'd love to do that. And that's how my journey really started, was with the Holyoke Police and Community Center, and they do great things over there still to this day. You know, and I got the pleasure of working with, you know, Detective Dorothy Beeben and another good friend of mine, Gonzo, you know, from the Sheriff's Department, and they do great work, and it's like, you know, that's where it really began, and that's when I really started to learn, like, you know, this is what you could do to help others.
Yeah. You're feeling better these days than you did 10, 15 years ago?
Oh, my God. Light years better.
And now, currently, you work at the Swift River Addiction Campus as a treatment advocate.
Yeah, yeah.
I've been there a little over a year now.
Yeah, yeah.
And tell us a little bit about what you do at Swift River and how that's going now. Yeah.
Man, I'll tell you right now, I through and through love Swift River. You know, it's interesting. You know, after the recovery coach job with the Holyoke Police and Community Center, you know, what really intrigued me about Swift River is, you know, as a recovery coach working in the field for a couple of years prior to being there, I got to go to so many different treatment facilities and engage with them at a limited capacity, you know, because of the way things are structured. But what I noticed immediately is like the way that they truly care about their clients and that sort of thing. And I said, I want to be more impactful and help people. So when I got this opportunity to come to Swift River and to be a part of such an amazing group of people, and all the treatment facilities I had went to, even as a client, I had never seen anything like it.
Yeah.
You go there, and in what I do as a treatment advocate, or what I get to do as a treatment advocate is I get to have real conversation and dialogue with those folks.
Well, you could see it, and we visited the campus a couple of months ago.
Yeah.
And it was phenomenal.
Yeah.
It's gorgeous. It's beautiful surroundings, and it's very comfortable. We talked to some of the staff members, so I know what you mean. Nicole, among others. We had a great chat with Nicole and others. Well, to find out more about Swift River, and Harvey, we're starting to run out of a little time, so we should have you back again to talk more about Swift River and all the things that's happening. But I congratulate you on your 5 years.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure and an honor for sure.
And also all the work you're doing. You've been involved with the Hampden County Addiction Task Force as well. You've immersed yourself into that, among other things. So all that you're doing, I think it's commendable.
Thank you.
And with what you've gone through since a little kid, going through how you've transformed your life, it certainly is a good model for a lot of other people. And all the work you're doing. Again, if somebody wants to find out about, Swift River, swiftriver.com. And also, Michael J. Dias is important for people. And we have a lot of friends over at Michael J. Dias.
Yes.
And so Michael J. Dias, we appreciate all their support too.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I appreciate the opportunity, and and again, I'm forever grateful for Michael J. Dias Foundation, HCAT, Holyoke Police Community Center, in the Western Mass community at large. Honestly.
And you like your life here in Western Mass?
Oh, I love it, man. It's crazy. 5 years ago, I said to myself when I first got sober, I said, I don't know why anybody would ever want to move out here, and when I finally get sober, I'm getting out of here after a year, and here it is, coming up, 5 years of being out here. God has done things for me that I could have never imagined, and this is what happens in recovery: is you get a life you never thought you even wanted.
Well, see, that's phenomenal, and there's a lot of work, and certainly, but it's worth it. It's worth everything you've gone through. I think you won't deny that.
Oh, absolutely, without a doubt.
Well, thank you, Harvey. Thank you, everybody, for listening. Again, Healing Voices Project. I'm Mike Torville here with Harvey McNulty. Appreciate you, buddy.
Thank you, man. I appreciate you.
We'll talk to you real soon, and talk to everybody else soon. Thank you very much.